fact, that was the first religious community the Prophet Muhammad encountered. He even married a Jewish woman named Sophia. What about Christianity? Does Islam have anything to say about Jesus? Well, I'll tell you right now, my name Eesaa is the Arabic pronunciation of Jesus. So I have named myself after him. But I'm not alone. Muslims in Africa name their kids Jesus. Muslims in Southeast Asia name their kids Jesus. Arab Muslims name their kids Jesus. Because Jesus has a special significance in Islam. Jesus is called many things in the Quran. But the Prophet Muhammad summarized all these things in a very beautiful hadith. He said, anyone who says the Shahada, the testimony of faith, remember, there's no God except the one true God, and Muhammad is his messenger, and then adds to that Jesus is the Messiah, that he is the servant and messenger of God, not just a prophet, that he is the Spirit of God and the Word of God bestowed upon the womb of Mary, born of a virgin, that paradise is real and true, and that hell is real and true. Anyone who says this statement will enter paradise through any gate they wish, even though their deeds may be few. Now, I have a question for those of you in the audience who are Christian. Did you know the Prophet Muhammad said that about Jesus Christ? Do you know of any other world religion that says those things about Jesus Christ? You see, folks, we have a lot in common. I mean, Jesus is the Messiah, the Word and Spirit of God, the messenger of God. He's a lot of things to Muslims. He's raised up and saved by God. He's coming back to kill the Antichrist. There'll be a man that comes one day, he'll stand up in Jerusalem, he'll say, I'm the Messiah. And eventually he'll say, I'm God. But that man won't be Jesus, the son of Mary. He'll be someone else. And that's why he's called that beautiful title in the Quran. You have to be the son of Mary to be the real Messiah. So, how do we know that that had an effect on the Muslim world? Well, Muslims came into the Christian world immediately after the death of Prophet Muhammad. You see, he said those things would happen. He said during his own lifetime the Muslims would take over the Persian Empire, they would take over Egypt, they would take over Asham, which is where Syria and Palestine are today, and eventually they would take over Byzantium, the Eastern Christian Empire. In other words, they would become the political controlling power in that area. So they immediately came into Syria right after the death of the Prophet Muhammad and became the political controlling power. Now, it's a common misconception that there's something in Islam called compulsion in religion. Now, interestingly enough, that's a direct contradiction of the Quran. The Quran says very beautifully, "La ikraha fid din." There's no compulsion in religion. قَدْ تَبَيَّنَ الرُّشْدُ مِنَ الْغَيِّ. Truth stands clear from falsehood. In Surah Al-Kahf of the Quran, God says, وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ. The truth is from your Lord. فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ. Let the one who wants to believe, believe. وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. And let the one who wants to reject faith, reject faith. So when the Muslims came into Syria, if that common misconception is true, they just ignored the Quran outright, and they said, you know what, we're going to force all these Christians to become Muslim. How long, historically speaking, did it take for Syria, a primarily Christian nation at that time in history, to become at least 50% Muslim? I'll get 3 guesses from the audience.
200 years.
200 years. Next. That's being generous, thank you.
60 years.
60 years. One more guess. 1,400 years. That was very generous. 500 years, people. 500 years before 50% of the people have become part of the faith of Islam. So if Arabs on horseback with sword in sheath are going throughout the world hacking heads off and forcing people to convert to our religion, then they were certainly doing a terrible job. But that's not what happened. And that's why there's still over 20 million Christians in the Middle East. That's why there's a giant cathedral in the middle of Cairo, a place that's been under Muslim political control for 1,400 years. Because, once again, there's no compulsion in religion. These people have been reading the Quran for that long, they've been reading Hadith for that long, and they know that the Prophet Muhammad did not compel anyone into this faith. I accepted Islam of my own accord, and I know other people who have. In fact, I know people who've accepted Islam and then left it. My own mother. My own mother became a Muslim, and she left Islam. Where's my mother today? Doing the same thing she was before. No one gave her a hard time. No one wrote her off. No one threatened her. No one did anything to her. Because there's no compulsion in religion. I will not drill this point home for you anymore. So what about America and Islam? Well, we have to understand that immediately after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, within 250 years, Islam became the largest political empire on earth. North Africa, Southern Europe, including Spain, and eventually Turkey and the southeastern part of Europe, Russia, Southeast Asia, and all of the Middle East united under one religion, worshiping the God of Abraham, believing in Jesus Christ, Moses, and the final messenger, Muhammad. So, eventually, a couple of amazing things would happen. You see, Muslims were commanded in the Quran to read and to ponder over the universe. Not worship the universe, but ponder over it, try to understand it. And so, that's exactly what they did. If you wanted to study any of the sciences available to you at that time in history, you wanted to study engineering, at least a primitive form of it at that time in history, you wanted to study chemistry, you wanted to study optometry, many of the things that you and I are benefiting from today, you would go to Fez in Morocco. You would go to Baghdad in Iraq. You would go to Cairo in Egypt. And you would study at the university systems that were set up by the Muslims. You would learn the Arabic language, which was the lingua franca of that particular part of the world for 1,000 years. However, eventually, the Muslim empire would gradually start to collapse.